Namaste. Spirit in me says, I see you, friends. Other than spirit, this is Unthink Me. A man has many names. I came here largely intending to be involved in a public discussion of integral, metamodern, and evolutionary spiritual theory. If you don't know what that means, this is covered in my other videos. The perspective that I'm coming from, it's how I think, and it's how I tend to talk about things, how I tend to conceptualize things, as opposed to other isms, and as opposed to other thought patterns that are trending at this time, core thought patterns. The idea behind the integral philosophy is it is an attempt to map and model all the isms, put them into a system, and to make sense of it all, and to figure out what's the next step. What's the next step, and where are we actually right now? What is the edge? Where is a person at if they're modern, if they're up to date, if their operating system is running at the current recommended version? I'm very pleased with how many people are participating in the dialogue, how many people are joining me to not only learn about this information, but to also share what they know about it. It's a learning experience for me, and hopefully it is for you as well. No matter where you're coming from, I think that we all have something to learn from one another. A really important topic in the modern debate is what the role of spirituality is. It is not simply to cast it aside. It seems pretty clear that that is not going to be the solution. There's what I would call a massive misunderstanding concerning these topics. And so when people talk about spirituality, they're often coming from perhaps a mystical or a magical or a mythical or a rational or a postmodern position. And so the role of integral then is to represent a joining of all those together, to place them where they belong. And that's what the map is, to make a map, to model this. They then make sense and they're compatible, so it's a compatibility thing. That perspective, the map maker, the bridge builder, is what we're calling second tier, or integral, or metamodern. It's the joining of philosophies that seem paradoxical or that seem dialectical to one another. When we're talking about religion, we may be talking about what I described as magical, mythical, rational, etc., which would be called first tier. But there's also the direct experience of the spiritual state, which we're calling third tier. The role of the second tier is simply to sort this stuff all out and to create methods, memes that we can use to discuss these topics. Regardless of my own practice or where I'm at, my role is largely just to sort this stuff out. This is an activity that we want as many people as possible participating in, because it's as far as the theory goes, it is an optimal outcome for people to philosophically adjust to one another and to all the world spaces that are existing in our world space together. The attempt is to be inclusive. The attempt is to assume that everybody is partially right while admitting that everybody's partially wrong in some way, that you can't have your cake and eat it too ideologically. There's just some stuff that doesn't fit. This goes every which way. The spiritual master, the guru, that you may doubt them, you may say that's not true, and you have a valid point. We have to explore that. We have to explore the abuses of religion and the abuses of spiritual communities. We need to modernize and update the spiritual understanding itself. But on the other hand, what we're calling the first tier lives in pretty much denial of the reality of spiritual states of consciousness and stages, which are the embodied final form of the spiritual state. It's a state that you can enter at will and enter whenever you want, not just one that happens mysteriously, ineffably, due to circumstances beyond your control. And from my perspective, the way I represent it is I think that the best means of getting there is through Eastern meditation practices, which are rapidly becoming westernized and, again, are the product of a great deal of misunderstanding. So that's the goal. I was planning to celebrate 100 subs. This was probably 2 months ago. Thank you, girls, guys, non-binies. Thank you, everyone. Due to the YouTube search algorithm, because of all the comment section activity, these long, epic conversations we're having, we've just passed not only 100 subs on my channel, but 200 subs now, and I haven't made a single video while this was happening. For what it is, keep commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing my videos if you can. I so appreciate all of your amazingly intelligent comments coming from all over the map, and humbly admit a lot of my audience is further along on a lot of this stuff than I am, particularly the third tier. So We may get into kind of nuts and bolts, and it may look like argumentation, but I assure you, I'm not an authority on spiritual states of consciousness. I'm familiar, but I'm not a teacher of that myself. I'm a philosopher. I'm an armchair philosopher that's wanting to do this on YouTube as a student and as a seeker and as an explorer, and just as a person who's making videos about this rather than like opening boxes that I got in the mail or talking about movies or video games. You know, this is kind of what I do. I talk about ideas that I feel aren't stale. But so is this a special celebratory video? I don't know. What's special to me is that I have not, by any stretch of the imagination, made great content on this channel. And yet, I'm still here, you're still here, I still want to be here. I enjoy this. So I have so much more to say, and I probably can get away with it for a while longer. So I look upon this and say that it is good, and I hope that you do also. This is a story from my grandmother. It's an old story. It's up in the high 30s in terms of how old the story is. When my brother and I were very little, magenta memes, any old babies, really, our delightfully orange meme grandma was preparing to give us a bath. After starting the water to a good temperature and helping us undress, she began to pick up my brother to set him in the tub. I started to protest, so she set him back down.
"What's the problem?"
she asked, likely also calling me a stink bomb. My brother and I often fought with each other. I pointed my little boogery finger at him and said, outraged,
"I don't want to take a bath with him."
Hoping to thwart further conflict and potential fits, Grandma acquiesced, redressing my brother and bringing him out into the hallway, where she gently apologized for the situation and for my behavior, and told him to wait until I was done. She came back into the bathroom where I stood, naked and victorious. The water was nearly full. She grabbed me under the arms and began to pick me up to haul me over the porcelain barrier between the warm water and my tiny body. But I squirmed and fought her off.
"What is it now?"
she demanded, likely also calling me a pillbox or a pooer in the housey. I was already beginning to sniffle and sob, my tiny toe-headed face looking like a deflated football, and I shouted at her,
"I can't take a bath alone."
The first time my grandma told me this story, she chuckled to herself. I was not perfectly following the story, so I didn't see why it was funny. The second time she told me, I at least understood well enough to find my own infantile hypocrisy amusing. It was only much, much later that I began to realize what this behavior actually implies about me as a person, what it says about foundational aspects of my character, and perhaps what it might say about the character of most people. She wasn't chuckling because of the punchline that I not only didn't want to take a bath with my brother, I also did not want to take a bath alone, so thereby eliminating all the possibilities. She was chuckling because, while I thought she had told me this random story out of nowhere, she had told it in response to things I was saying about my current life. I may have been talking about my job, my rock band, my friends, my girlfriend, the town I was living in, my vehicle, my classes, any of those. The way I talked about those things, I can reasonably assume, had the skeletal structure of, well, I'm doing this thing because it seems like I have to, all things considered, but it's really driving me nuts. This thing is tough to be involved in. These people are difficult to be around. I'm working really hard and I feel like I'm going nowhere. I'm not entirely sure that I'm satisfied with what's going on. This is the sort of thing I might have said to my grandma most of my life. And here's how I can tell whether you're over 40 or not. This is the magic trick. I promise you this isn't true. But if you're over 40, you're imagining my grandmother in this situation, her being a senior, me being 3, 12, 23, 35, whatever. In her head, she's increasingly recognizing this pattern, whether she knows it or not, as me over the years. Regardless of how old I am, she's an elderly woman the whole time. She's saying to herself, what I wouldn't give to have to contend with these supposed problems. What a pleasure it would be to be forced to close the Subway restaurant with my friends and my energy. What bliss to get pulled over and harassed by a police officer, to get into a fist fight with someone when a bad night was going out to a party and not connecting with anybody, and a bad day was getting dumped and having to be just friends with someone I had no real business being with in the first place. Grandma wasn't thinking any of this, any of the time. She wasn't like that. But if you're over 40, that's what we now project on her. She'd just seen this pattern. The pattern had triggered a memory. She'd found the memory amusing and shared it with me. I don't believe that she knew why she was telling me this story. For those of you over 40, I suggest the following interpretation, that the younger folks will understand in a distantly hip, ironic sense. What I would tell my 3-year-old self, my 16-year-old self, my 28-year-old self, my 39-year-old self, is that you should do what the caretaker suggested. Get into the tub, play the game, get in the tub with your brother. The water's warm. Things are pretty good a lot of the time, you know? You're pissed off, you're tired of getting trampled on. That's okay. You're here to take a bath, to get clean, so you don't get poop in your eyes and have to go to the hospital, so you don't get lice or infections. You don't get that, but that's what's up. There'll be a nice warm towel, you'll sit in front of the heater farting, your pajamas are already selected and brought to you, you're served a snack while you watch TV and play with toys, and then you're encouraged to go to bed. It's so nice that Grandma's content at this point to merely experience it vicariously. It's one of her greatest joys in life. And when you sleep, you might have nightmares. You might hear your grandmother snoring from her bedroom and dream of a horrible swarm of wasp creatures. And you wake up to find yourself in the warm darkness, unable to see what's going on the floor, in the closet, in the rest of the house. You could call out, but there's nothing wrong. It's just scary here. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it always will be. But just do the thing that you think you should be doing to the best of your ability. Forgive the situation to the best of your ability. Don't try and convince yourself of what you should think or feel, because you don't know. You're not missing out. This is what life has always been. It's just fine. Capitalism, parenting, love, being in a rock band, spiritual practice. It's a Rorschach ink blot. It doesn't care what you think you see. But as long as you see something, you're not a psychopath. What is the use of a thought like this? A tiny flickering flame from the back of a cavern. What the hell is this supposed to be? You get to decide some of the time, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get in the bath with your siblings. Sometimes you get in the bath alone. Sometimes you smell bad. Sometimes this is actually just an objectively bad analogy for anything. You're invited to this flawed moment with me. This is my goddamn bathtub. The story of life is evolving. Yes, biologically, ideologically, civilization is evolving, but I'm also talking about your personal story. We get to have one. The story of your life is evolving. And so maybe this is your goddamn bathtub too. The future is moving towards a series of outcomes that we do not comprehend and we cannot predict. It has never evolved faster. You have every reason to suspect it may surprise us yet again and offer something unimaginable. I sincerely hope that you get up every single morning, look a stuffed animal right in the eyes, pump your fist in the air and shout yeah. You deserve joy. Thank you for blessing me with your presence, for coping with my inadequate entertainment value, for building an organism that is never finished. Be sure to get up, move around, stretch, and do what you want. Take a look. Listen to it. Breathe in the air. Blow out the candle, and we'll take another step forward.